Hello, I am Oscar Vega. I am a professor of mathematics at California State University, Fresno, also called Fresno State. I am really happy to be the MC for the rest of our time together here at the virtual Field of Dreams, especially because our next session, which we call Fields of Success, features Alliance scholars who have earned their PhDs and have been working in the real world after getting their degree. In this session, they will offer us some of their wisdom and tell us what they have learned, what surprises they have faced, and will also share some advice. Our moderator for this panel discussion is well suited for the job, an Alliance scholar and a fellow Iowa alumni. Roberto Soto is an assistant professor of mathematics and math education at California State University, Fullerton, and he was recently honored with a CSU Faculty Innovation and Leadership Award. Congratulations, Roberto. Here's a quote from a former student of Roberto's who began their doctoral program in mathematics at Emory University this fall. Dr. Soto redefines what it means to be a math professor and a mentor. His ability to bring people out of their comfort zone so that they may take advantage of research, financial, and networking opportunities is the reason most of his students go on to pursue master's degrees or doctorates in mathematics. That is really impressive. Roberto, I'll let you introduce your panel members.
Okay. Muchas gracias, Oscar. Thank you so much. That was really nice, and nice to see you again virtually.
Nice to see
you. Okay. Like Oscar said, we're here. One of our favorite panels, one of maybe our most popular panels here, the Fields of Success panels, because we get Alliance scholars to come back and share their stories of success. So today we're fortunate to have three wonderful Alliance scholars. Julia Anderson-Lee from Northrop Grumman. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Alina Murillo from Brown University, and April Harry from rover.com. So nice to meet you all. Hope you're doing well.
Hi, everybody.
I apologize. I should have said Dr. Julia Anderson, Dr. Alina Murillo, and Dr. April Harry. You earned that doctorate, and it matters. So thank you so much for being on here.
Sure.
Okay. So we'd like to start off by having you introduce yourself, if you don't mind. So there's a couple of questions that we have, and of course we'll have questions from students and the audience themselves. But the first part is we'd like you to introduce yourself. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you're currently employed. Maybe what graduate school program that you went to. Why did you choose math or mathematical sciences or stats? And then how did choosing math prepare you for where you're at right now? We'll start. So I'll have an order so that you know. So we'll start with April, and then we'll go to Julia, and then Anarina. So, and again, if I've mispronounced your name, please correct me as part of the introduction. So April, take it away.
So hi, I'm Dr. April Harry. So I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Xavier University of Louisiana. I graduated in 2010 from there, and I got a PhD in statistics from Purdue University in 2017. And since then, I've been working as a data scientist in Seattle, Washington, where I currently work at rover.com, which is a pet care services company that technically falls in the technology sphere because we're an app and a website. So I kind of found mathematics kind of almost by chance, because I found myself as an undecided major when I started college. I took calculus my first semester, and I really enjoyed it, surprisingly. I'd never really found a strong pull towards mathematics, but I really liked the material, and I liked not having to write papers. And I really enjoyed my professor, Professor Jones, and I ended up majoring in mathematics, and it helps me in my everyday life because my job is math. So as a data scientist, I build what we call machine learning models, and I work with tons of data every day to help my company make decisions about what we should do to offer the best experience possible to our customers based on the data that we see. So that's me.
Thank you, April. That's great. Julia, where are you at? And introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I'm Dr. Julia Anderson-Lee, and I'm going to apologize in advance if you hear some whining. I'm very familiar with rover.com because I have a dog. Her name is Dakota, and she has decided at this moment that she wants lots of attention. So I apologize in advance. I I got my math degree from Spelman College in Atlanta, and I knew from, I don't know how old, that I was going to be a math major in college, but what I didn't know was what I was going to do with that. And Spelman was a liberal arts college, and so they didn't have engineering as a major, but I was part of a dual degree engineering program. And so I got to go to Spelman early to work on some credits. And as part of that program, I got to take an early engineering course. And I said, oh, I kind of want to do this. This is pretty cool. This is a cool way to use math in the real world. And so I was part of the dual degree engineering program at Spelman. I decided to stay at Spelman for 4 years instead of transferring to an engineering school. And then I went to the Field of Dreams, where I met a few professors from Iowa State. And that's where I went and got my PhD. I did a co-major in mathematics and civil engineering. And so I focused on structural engineering and modeling rock and wall systems there. After Iowa State, I was able to I got to work at Boeing in South Carolina as part of an NDE team. So what NDE is non-destructive evaluation, which is a fancy way of saying testing the plane without breaking it. And what was cool there was lots of signals and all of that in terms of the ways that we performed NDE. And I'm now at Northrop Grumman. While I was in Boeing, I kind of decided I think I wanted to do more mathematics and get a little into stats. And so I decided I wanted to do modeling and simulation. And so I'm now at Northrop Grumman in Baltimore doing that. So it's been really fun. I love it. Love my math.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. And Anarina, we're going to have you introduce yourself also.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Dr. Anarina Murillo, and I am currently an assistant professor at Brown University. I started last year, and I'm affiliated with the medical school, the Department of Pediatrics, and also the School of Public Health, the Center for Statistical Sciences. So I'm originally from California, California girl, born and raised at heart. And I decided to go to Arizona State University, and I did not know that I was going to study math. I was always interested in math. I tutored my peers in middle school and high school, always loved math, but I didn't know what to do with a degree in math. And I actually spent a lot of time in high school volunteering for the American Cancer Society. So I actually thought I was going to go into medical school or public health. And I decided to go to Arizona State University. I had an older brother that was there pursuing his PhD in applied math. If you attended the industry and government panel, he was there yesterday. And I continued to pursue my interest in math in college. My brother was inspired me to continue to do that. But I also was able to find a connection with math and my interest in public health and medicine. And I was able to do that through a mentor at Arizona State. His name is Carlos Castillo Chavez. And my sophomore year in college, he helped me find a research lab to work in. It was an obesity lab where I mainly worked as a statistician in the lab. I continued to tutor my peers in calculus in college as a freshman and throughout. And so I continued to maintain my interest in math, but still not really knowing what career I wanted. And as I continued my work in obesity, my junior year in college, I met another professor, Math Alliance mentor, actually, Dr. Renee Moore. And she is a biostatistician who does obesity work. And she came to ASU and she gave a research talk on her work. And I thought, wow, this is math in action, using mathematics to understand obesity. This is really cool. I've never seen this before. And she invited me to attend the JSM Diversity and Biostatistics workshop. It's at the Joint Statistical Meeting. It was right before my senior year. And that was when I learned about the field of biostatistics and became really interested. I didn't know there was more to statistics other than doing like regression models and t-tests. And so for me, that was really exciting. And I talked to my mentor, Carlos Castillo Chavez, and he encouraged me to apply for various programs, and he gave me a few suggestions. And towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I decided that I wanted to continue on and get a PhD and become a professor. And so I later had some offers and received an NSF fellowship under Carlos to stay in Arizona State to study applied mathematics with the concentration in statistics. And I really wanted to stay and work with him. And I also really appreciated all of his mentorship. So I stayed in Arizona State. I continued my work in obesity using different mathematical and statistical models. I also worked at the Mayo Clinic for some time and realized I wanted to continue my research in health and medicine, but using quantitative tools. I later did a postdoc at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I worked with David Allison, who's also a Math Alliance mentor. And then after that, I continued on my path, and I went to Brown as a visiting researcher at the Data Science Initiative, and Carlos Castillo-Chavez was always also there. He invited me to go to Brown with him. And then after that, opportunity came up to stay at Brown and join the faculty team there, and I ended up staying. So in my work right now, I work as a collaborative biostatistician. And so I spend a lot of time working with physicians and public health researchers and epidemiologists, studying various topics in pediatrics. I had done some work in childhood obesity. I spent a lot of my time in Alabama developing my research in obesity. And so that led me to where I am right now at Brown. So I do a lot of work in biostatistics, but I also continue my work in mathematical modeling. And so I sort of bridge both statistical and mathematical modeling with computational studies. And so that's basically what I do. I love my work, and I'm very grateful also for David and Phil for inviting me to be part of this panel and for re-engaging me in Math Alliance as well. So thank you.
Well, thank the three of you for being here. I mean, it's great for us to learn about the diversity of mathematics and the diversity of how we come to like mathematics. We all have different stories to share, and these stories are great because I'm sure they resonate with lots of students that are wondering if math is a career for them. And because maybe like the three of you, maybe they love math, but maybe they don't want to be a professor like me. Maybe they want to try something else. And so there's definitely different ways, or maybe they want to do some cancer research. So it's great that you all have different backgrounds and different ways of coming to love and like math. And use it in your fields. At this time, I'm sure that since the stories resonated so much, there must be questions in the audience. So we do have Roy. Roy, say hi to the audience.
Hello, everyone.
And so you can submit your questions to Roy, I believe through Swapcard, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can correct me on this.
This is correct.
Okay. So through Swapcard, any questions that you have for Dr. Anderson, Dr. Harry, or Dr. Murillo, Dr. Anderson Lee, Dr. Harry, and Dr. Murillo would be great. And then I have a couple more, but Roy, as soon as you get some questions, maybe after the next question, maybe we can start listening to some of the audience's questions. All right, so earning the PhD in math can be challenging, I guess, for a lot of us for different types of reasons. And we're hoping maybe you can give us a little insight into this. You know, maybe there's an obstacle as you were earning your PhD that you had to overcome. And how did you overcome it? How did you deal with any of the challenges that arose, or maybe just one challenge that arose while you were earning your PhD? So I'll give you a little bit of maybe 30 seconds to think about that. The order right now, we'll start with Anarina, and then Julia, and then we'll go to April, if that's okay. So Anarina, take it away.
Sure, thank you for the question. So I think for me, the challenging part, because I'm so interdisciplinary, was building the right committee. And so thankfully, I had Carlos Castillo-Chavez as my mentor. And because he was so well networked with people at Arizona State and also outside of Arizona State, he was able to connect me with other people who maybe took a similar path or had similar interests. So my PhD committee was composed of 2 applied mathematicians who had expertise in math biology. And then I also had a statistician and also a behavioral obesity researcher. So I had a very interdisciplinary team. For me, the hardest part was finding the right committee and support, because you're going to be working with your committee for several years. They're the ones who are going to help shape your research program and help train you for what's next afterwards. And so having the right support of faculty to help me identify what work I wanted to do and where I wanted to go afterwards and what training I needed, training in statistics and programming particularly for me. And then because my research is so collaborative and interdisciplinary, making those connections to and finding the right conferences to go to. So that was probably the biggest challenge. I was passionate about my studies. Courses were difficult, but my committee continued to encourage me and help me along that path. And so I think that was probably the most difficult thing for me to complete my PhD.
Thank you, Anarina. That's great. I think you're right. People definitely make a difference. So I have a follow-up question for all of you, maybe on the people that helped you along the way. So, but we'll go ahead. First, we're talking about obstacles first, so let me stick to that. So, Julia, if you can share with us kind of maybe an obstacle.
Sure. So for me, one of the obstacles was certainly enduring through the entire program, right? So your PhD program is composed of your qualifying exams, and then you have your prelim exam, and then you have your final defense. And for me, it felt like, oh, okay, I did my prelim, I did my qualifying exams, I'm okay. And I thought that there would be this sort of sigh of relief and like, oh, all right, I can chill out for a little while. But I didn't find that to be the case. It was like, okay, you did that one thing and now you got to keep climbing up this hill until you finish. And so enduring the race, so to speak, I would say is a big challenge. And for me, the way I overcame it, at least, was I had a community composed of mentors and faculty members, but also other graduate students, whether they were in mathematics or not. I definitely created a community, and so we made study spaces for ourselves. So even on those days when I was like, my brain isn't working anymore, I can't do it, we would have study sessions, and they'd say, just read that one paper, just read that one paper, just write this one thing, just knock off a little bit. And that really helped keep me going, because there were days where I was really into it and they weren't. And so I was able to say, just read that one paper, just write this one article, and so I think it's really important that wherever you go to grad school, that you make sure that you create that support system of other graduate students and faculty members who tell you, like, these are some other students who you should talk to in this class or in this analysis class or in PDEs. They took this, they did really well. You should ask them, how they got through this problem and all that. So that was one particular challenge enduring through.
Well, thank you, Julia. Yes, definitely. That I remember those days too. And so again, community seems to come up again one more time. So we'll go to April and see what she says and what her obstacle was and kind of how she overcame that. So April.
For me, the largest obstacle in graduate school was definitely mental health. So I would say that graduate school can often be the perfect storm, particularly in the research phase. It can be extremely isolating when you no longer have coursework or kind of any structure to your day. And sometimes you're so focused on like this singular problem that nobody but like you and your advisor perhaps even understand. So sometimes you're kind of alone a lot of times, and you get so wrapped up in your research that it's hard to separate yourself from what you're working on. And so sometimes when things aren't going so well with your project, you kind of translate that to like, oh, maybe I'm not going so well as a person. And so that's kind of a trap that I got into. And so I started feeling really sad. And like that really sadness kind of like it evolved into like I really can't get out of bed. Oh, I really can't do anything. And so so the way that like I was able to overcome that is that number one, I needed to actually seek out some help. So like, if you find yourself like in such a situation, actually investigate like student health services and see if you can like see a therapist to talk about such things. If you need to take a break, like I just talked to my advisor about what was going on, or like maybe you don't need to tell them exactly what's going on if you don't feel comfortable with that. And I took a month off of research, didn't do research for that month, and I just like needed to heal for a second. And third, just try to remind yourself that you are not your work, and it's okay to take some time away from it and not feel guilty. So that was my thing.
Okay. Thank you so much, April, about talking about mental health. It is a serious issue that we all have maybe some connection to. I know my wife, when she first started for her PhD, that was a rough time for us too. So I want to thank you for mentioning that, because it is important that we take care of ourselves, and especially right now that we're all doing this through Zoom. It's, we've talked about how people are so important to us, and right now we can't even be there together. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I appreciate that. And I'm sure the audience and all the students appreciate this too. It seems like we do have a question from the audience. So before we talk about community, let's go ahead and go from the audience. So Roy, what do you got for us?
So we have a question from Juan Cristobal, who asked, do you have any advice for current grad students who are being pushed a lot harder than the usual grad student because of COVID and election stuff? I'm finding that I'm questioning if I want this grad degree a lot more often than I expected going into the program.
Okay, I'll leave it open to anyone who wants to answer that. Maybe repeat the question, Roy, one more time.
Yes. So one more time, it's, do you have any advice for current grad students who are being pushed a lot harder than the usual grad student because of COVID and election stuff? I'm finding that I'm questioning if I want this grad degree a lot more often than I expected going into the program.
That's a tough one, but
I have one suggestion, but I will leave it open for like criticism of whether it's realistic or not, because I've been away from graduate school for a few years. So I know that sometimes things don't work the way that I think. But one thing that I when I think back on graduate school, I wish I had done was in my meetings with my advisor, when we talked about goals and things like writing papers or like analyses that we wanted to do, are like things that we were like goals we were setting for the future. I wish that I had written those down and like agreed to checkpoints in those goals, so that when we talked about those later, I could point to them and be like, we didn't agree to that. Like when we talked about those later, because I kind of feel like sometimes there's moving goalposts, and those moving goalposts lead to like, oh, I'm in grad school another year. Like I kind of feel like that's quite often the thing that happens. So I would suggest maybe writing things down and trying to come to agreements with your PI or advisor. So.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. I never even thought of something like that, but that would be great. Yes, thank you.
I remember the moving goalpost. You're absolutely right. That's a really good suggestion. I was going to speak to, I guess you questioning whether or not you really want the grad degree. I think that's kind of normal. I know I went through that. I was like, I don't know why and so I'm from New York, and then I went to school in Atlanta, and then I did my grad degree in Ames, Iowa. And I was like, why am I here? Like, I'm in the middle of nowhere by myself, and I have to do all this work. And I imagine now that because of COVID, you're at home all the time. So maybe your professor was like, well, you should be reading all the time because you're home. Like, what else can you be doing? Or, I don't know what those expectations are. And so I would say when you're questioning whether or not you really want the degree, I think you should think about what really are your career goals or your life goals, or why did you want to go into grad school in the first place? And check in with, are those things still real for you? Do you still really want those things? Do you still really want to be a professor at a college? And is it okay if maybe this pressure means that it maybe for you, your goalposts, instead of extending them, maybe you do just set them out a little further. And so maybe it does take a little longer, but it preserves your mental state and your ability to get through it in the best way for you.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the mute button, but yes, I agree. Thank you, Julia. That's great advice. And Arena, you don't have to answer, but if you have something you'd like to share, that'd be great too.
Sure, I'll add. I mean, we have already great advice, but I'll add something. So I would encourage, I think I agree with Dr. Anderson Lee that everyone, I also questioned, during my PhD, is this really what I want to do? What are my goals afterwards? I thought about government and industry positions as well, even during my postdoc and in grad school. So I think many of us are, had the same questions and thought process as well. And I thank you for the question, because I think it's great that you're asking, and I think it's great that you're reaching out and you're here at Math Alliance, and meeting with other people and other scholars, and as well as other mentors. And I think that's really important, because I think for me, going through school, it was important for me to understand that I wasn't the only one who had these questions and had these feelings. And right now, we're in a very difficult time right now with the pandemic and a lot of things going on in our country and worldwide. And so I would encourage you to speak with your mentors, because I do believe that a lot of our mentors want us to be successful. And I think, communicating with your mentor and as the suggestions that we already have earlier by Dr. Harry, talking about expectations and making goals and having realistic goals, but also taking care of yourself and your mental health. I think that's really important. So my advice would be to communicate with your mentor about how you're feeling, what you're going through, and also your peers. And, maybe there are ways to work with your colleagues on completing assignments, reading papers together. So that way you can meet your deadlines together. And so that's my advice.
Well, thank you to all of you. I think that's really great advice. I think, and it doesn't stop usually, even after you finish with grad school. I know me, every time I come to this panel, I'm inspired to maybe try something new, maybe become a data scientist, maybe learn how to program in Python a little bit more. So it's things can change for us, and that's okay. We're always learning new things, and we're not stuck in our path. I think that's the one thing I like to share with my students is you're never really stuck. You always, especially with math, you always seem to have choices. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think those are great. We do have another question. So Roy, feel free to share the question that's coming in right now.
So a question from John Rock says, are there any courses you would recommend an undergrad to take in order to follow a path like yours?
Okay, I'll give an order this time since I think all of you can say probably something. Julia, would you like to start us off on this one?
Sure. I was going to say immediately what came to mind was the stats class. I don't know if you're at your school, you specifically have a mathematics major or a statistics major, but I would absolutely take a math class and maybe a programming class, a computer science class, like an intro level. I think that those two would really be able to set you up for industry, because even as a mathematician, what I have found is that when engineers hear that you're a mathematician, they're like, oh, you know, stats. Or, you know, and it's like, no, it's not the math that I studied. And like maybe, and sure, maybe I'm closer to it, right? Because, you know, I'm closer to it than maybe you are, but I am not a statistician, right? And so I think, and it's funny you talk about changing your path. I have thought now about taking some more stats class and brushing up on a few things for that reason. So I would definitely say a stats class or a computer science class.
Thank you, Julia. And Irina, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, so definitely a statistics class. I highly encourage that. But I also encourage maybe a class that you're interested in going into. So if you're interested in business or finance, I know some schools have requirements that you have to be accepted into the program. But if you are interested in finance or business or another field in engineering or in medicine, biology, or like maybe a special topics health course, I would encourage you to take that, regardless of whether you decide to go into industry, academia, or government. Because I think in any, now communication is so important, and just being exposed to different fields and different topics allows you to understand other like languages, and it allows you to communicate. So I think, you know, I would encourage taking a course in another topic of interest that you might be looking for a job or internship or a graduate program in.
Right. Thank you, Anarina. And April?
Yeah, I definitely second the programming and the stats classes. And I would also say perhaps something like a business analytics class. I'm not sure if such a thing exists. I never actually took one myself, but those are things that I've had to pick up on the job. And it would be nice if I had just had a course to tell me what a conversion rate is, instead of having to like read a ton of like blogs and stuff.
Thank you, April. Sorry, I'm trying to read at the same time. I'm still learning how to do this, but yes, I agree with all of you. I think that those are great classes. I tell my students to take those, especially when they choose pure math like me. As a pure mathematician, I didn't realize I would limit some of my options. I know how to program a little bit, but I would, you know, I feel like I could help my students even more, getting them ready for the real, well, for jobs outside of academia, if we can do a little bit more programming, even in our pure classes. So I thank you for that, and the stats too. Now as a math educator, stats is becoming much more important. So thank you for sharing all those classes. I think those are great options. I think we have one more question, so this is great. Yes, Roy, please. Questions are great.
Right, so another question from Matthew Newton asks, while getting your doctorate, what helped and how have you stayed motivated to continue your research?
Okay. I'll go this time, Anarina, April, and Julia. I'm doing all the permutations, you know, because I have to.
Thank you. Could you repeat the question just one more time, please?
Yes, the question was, while getting your doctorate, what helped and how have you stayed motivated to continue your research?
Okay, thank you. So I think what helped is finding, for me, because I'm very research oriented, finding others who have a similar interest as me. And I think also finding other underrepresented minorities too is also really encouraging. So recently, last year, or this past summer, I was accepted to a scholars program at UC San Francisco on implementation science, and it's for underrepresented minorities. And that's a recent example of how I've sought out other junior faculty who are underrepresented minorities and extremely talented, who have similar goals as I do. We all care about research and education and mentoring. And so I think for me, just a challenge is finding a peer support system. And so ways I've done that is also participating in things like Math Alliance and SACNES and just keeping my network. And so that's how I've continued, I guess, currently in my current role right now.
Okay. Thank you, Anarina. I think I said April next.
Yeah, I would definitely second the having community and finding other underrepresented people. So I guess this is kind of like not the same, but kind of similar to the COVID situation that probably a lot of students are going through right now. For the final part of my graduate program, I was in Boston because my advisor had left Purdue. So I went with her, but I was still enrolled at Purdue. So I was away from my entire cohort, even though I was still enrolled at Purdue. So I didn't really know anyone in the city I was living in. So I was still kind of like communicating remotely with my community, so to speak. So so even though I still had that, I would every day like write out a to-do list, take a picture of it and text it to my friend who was all the way in Indiana, and she would do the same thing. And so we would kind of be like accountable to each other in that way. So just kind of like having that like bond like to each other and being accountable to each other was like kind of like the thing that pushed me over the finish line. So just having people is just really important.
Okay, thank you, April. Julia?
I second that emotion. So I was going to mention to-do lists also, but Dr. Harry is on it. So one other thing that my friends and I did, we all kind of decided like we're going to finish our programs in our different disciplines, but we're going to finish our programs. And so what we did was we created a calendar, like an Apple calendar or a Google calendar that we all shared. And so we said when we were going to do these things, and we sort of backed out the dates. Like I want to do prelim in December. So that means that I need to have some certain things ready in June and all in that. So we did the schedule, and then we sent the calendar out to everybody. And of course things shift and update, but the calendar sort of helped keep us all engaged and all accountable. And it allowed us to, even if we got lost in whatever we were doing, we could check in with somebody else and say, oh, you have this today. How did that go? Or, you know, how what's next for that? Or how are you preparing for this thing you have next week? And as far as keeping the research going, I haven't done as good a job as I would like to, because I work in, Northrop Grumman is basically a defense contractor. And so we don't do a lot of external publishing, but there are internal publishing opportunities. And because I decided when I'm coming to Northrop that was something that I wanted to do. And so I've started to seek out those mentors who I know are publishing within Northrop. And so that I can start to see what kinds of things are they able to publish and what are they working on and how does that link up with me or not. And if it doesn't, they introduce me to other people who are working on things that I'm interested in. And so sort of working the internal circuit is what I've been starting to do now in Northrop.
Well, thank you again. And I keep hearing this same theme of community over and over again, that we need to meet people. So that brings me to a question that I was thinking about. So as an undergrad, I was really shy. I think I spoke to one professor my whole time there. So how can someone like me maybe start learning how to network a little bit more? I'm not shy anymore, but I was there at that one point. What advice would you give to people that, or even if you're not shy, but you're still having trouble maybe networking at conferences or anywhere else? How can I start developing a community? How can I start getting myself out of that shell, I guess? So this time we'll start with April and Arena and then Julia.
So that was totally me too. Like I always would have that question when I would hear grad students talk about like how they had to have homework groups when they were in grad school, or they wouldn't have gotten through their homework. So I was like, oh, so I'm just going to fail grad school because I can't possibly ask anybody for help. I'm like too shy. But so like one thing that was kind of funny is like, so I ended up with like this huge like group of people doing homework together, just because like I remember once we got back like homework pages in like one of the first classes of like the first year of grad school. And I remember I just kind of like saw the grade that I got and I sighed. And the girl behind me also sighed at the same time. So we sighed in unison, and then we kind of looked at each other and kind of discussed it. And just from there, that little seed of an interaction, like we worked together on homeworks. And then like the next time, like the person behind her was like, hey, can I join you guys? And like from there, the group kind of grew. So like and just kind of those one-on-one interactions, sometimes you can build a bond that other people will kind of like latch on to. So like I would say if you're having trouble networking, just focus on like the one-on-one. And sometimes that's a little bit more like conquerable than just trying to focus on tackling a whole group of people at once.
Thank you, April. Anarina?
Yeah. So I would say that I'm a reserved naturally. And so I would say I'm pretty introverted. Like I kind of just like to be on my own. And I think for me, and I went to Arizona State University, which as an undergrad and grad student, so there are over, I think, like 80,000 students. So it's a big campus. But what I did when I was an undergraduate was I volunteered a lot. I pursued things that I was interested and passionate about. And so I volunteered and also tutored. So through those opportunities, I was able to make connections with some people. And then in terms of talking to my professors, I only talked to like maybe a handful of professors. I was also very shy about going to a professor too, and didn't really know how to approach them or what to say or what to ask. But I was motivated to do well in my classes. So whenever I struggled or had questions, I definitely went to office hours. And that was kind of a nice icebreaker because I was going there for a reason, asking about an exam or asking about a topic. So it took off the pressure off of me to, come up with something interesting to talk about. But I would say that I think what I realized once I started going to grad school was I realized it was important to tell people what you're doing. And even now and into my career. And so I realize now it's important to let your professors know what conferences you're going to. If your poster was accepted to SOCMAS or something, let them know that you're going to be there because they might be there too. And so I learned that, it's important to communicate with your mentors and people in your department what you're doing. So in graduate school, what I started to do was when we had a seminar speaker, I would make a goal for myself to ask a question once a month. Maybe not every seminar that was going on every week, but at least once a month, just raise my hand and ask a question. And I continued to do that. And that really helped me continue in my career because now I'm not afraid to ask questions. So you could do something like that too. Just make a goal for yourself to just put yourself out there and ask questions, or go to one professor's, office once a month or something, or once a semester. So that's my advice.
Sorry.
So so those are both. That's really good advice. I'm an extrovert, so I'll talk to a hole in the wall. But I had friends who've done similar things where they sort of created a chart for themselves, and if they talked to somebody new, they would give themselves like a star that day. So I'm just, you can do little self-motivation things like that. I did start going to seminars in undergrad so that I would start to see, well, who else is really invested in learning more about math and not just getting this math degree. So that's one thing, especially in undergrad, when you start going to those seminars that are like not during classes and they're afterwards or during lunch or something, you start to see who's also thinking about grad school, right? And so that's a nice, easy way to network. I was always scared to ask questions though, because I didn't want to look stupid, frankly. But somebody else would ask a question. I'd be like, that's my question. And then I'd say, I had the same question. Did you understand the answer? Because I didn't understand the answer. And then we would talk about it. And then maybe I also had this thing where I would wait till most people left the room, and I would maybe ask the speaker when they're there by themselves, and then they would say it, and I'd be like, why is it this? And then they say, and I go, oh, okay, I'm not stupid. I just wasn't, all right. And we'd get on one page that way. So I think like Dr. Murillo said, the one-on-one is important too. But also, give yourself some incentives. The stars might help. The little star stickers.
I like that idea. I like that a lot. I'm going to use it because once in a while I'll still go to a conference where I don't want to talk to anyone. And so that's a good idea. Thank you so much for sharing all these ideas. I think they're great. I think today, we still have one more day of Fields of Conference. Maybe all of us that are in the audience that haven't talked to anyone yet, maybe we can make it a goal to maybe contact one other student and contact one professor or one of the moderators through Swapcard or any other way that you can. So that's great advice. So thank you so much for all the great advice. It seems like we have another question though. So Roy, please go ahead.
Yeah, there's actually going to be two. So I guess I'll ask the first one, have you all answer, and then I'll go to the second one. Okay, so the first one I got came from Ben Brubacher. He asks, math progress can be slow and take lots of attention while the rest of the world seems fast and frenetic. Is that a challenge, a comfort? How do you cope with this? Do you want me to repeat?
Yes, one more time.
So one more time is math progress can be slow and take lots of attention while the rest of the world seems fast and frenetic. Is that a challenge, a comfort? How do you cope with this?
Okay. So the next permutation I have is Dr. Anderson Lee, then Dr. Harry, and then Dr. Maria. So hopefully that was enough time to think. Dr. Anderson Lee.
I'll think while I'm talking, only because I remember for part of my thesis, this one part of my thesis, I had to prove that something was zero, and I was like, why? I know it's zero. How do I get to the fact that it's zero? And it took me like 3 months. And then I had friends that were in stats, and they were just like running their data overnight and doing these kinds of tests. And I was like, I just need this thing to be zero. And so you're right in that, the math can be very slow. And so I was trying to think of an answer, like, how do you cope with that? And I don't know that I have a good answer for how you cope with it, other than knowing that it's not just you. That happens in general when you're trying to prove something. It's not always easy to prove exactly what you'd like to, and it does take time. It just kind of is what it is. And I don't know if that's good or bad or part of the beauty of math, so to speak. Because once I got the thing to equal zero, I was like, I knew it. I was so excited. I was like, yes, next thing. All right, now I got to show this is one. All right, do it again, So, but to that point, so it's sort of, for me at least, it's kind of the work of art for me that is mathematics. And so it's sort of just part of the territory I've found. And I guess it's part of why I loved it, because it's like a puzzle. And you got to figure out these little pieces, and sometimes it takes longer to put it together, but it's still worth it all in the end, for me at least,
Thank you, Dr. Anderson Lee. Dr. Harry, what about you?
So I have quite a different perspective on this. So I work in, so I'm going to set aside my grad school experience, which was like super slow, and think about my current experience, which is working in tech. And if I could like summarize what it's like to work in tech, is that everything really is like super fast. Like it's all about working quickly, really fast. And as a matter of fact, like we call the kind of units that we work in sprints, which is 2 weeks. Like we think about things in 2 weeks. We portion out work in 2 weeks. And as a matter of fact, at my company, one of our company's values is an intentional balance of pace and precision. So quite often, data scientists butt right up against that value of an intentional balance of pace and precision, because often, in an effort to like come to the best answer or the best model or the best mathematical solution, that's often kind of slow to come to. Like you really want to kind of think about it and be really thoughtful. But when it comes down to it, like you might eke out a tiny bit of actual practical like gain for the company by like doing this long, like perfect, elegant solution versus like putting together something scrappy in 2 weeks that like will get you most of the way there, right? So what I've learned in like the few years that I've been working as a data scientist is that sometimes it's better to just work iteratively. So like just set goals of like, I'm just going to chunk out my work to like build a model that is going to improve us by like, let's improve by 5%. Now let's improve by 5% on that 5%. Now let's just keep working on it and working on it. And then eventually, hopefully, maybe we can get to a point where we can like have an absolute like step change where we improve again. And so rather than thinking about the whole process as being slow, we can see it as a series of quick improvements, and then maybe super fast, like step up that really is something that we built up to over time. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I think it's valuable for us to see different types of opinions on this. So thank you. Dr. Murillo?
I think for me, when some of my research, when I was finishing my PhD, when some of my work took a long process time, it was frustrating. I was like, well, what am I doing wrong? Like, why isn't this working? Or why is it taking so long? It should be done already. Or, I'm writing and then I have to redo some analysis of, what happened now, it's going to change my results. And so I think in the moment it was like, frustrating and challenging for me. But I think now looking back, I feel comfort because I have papers that I've been working on for like 2 or 3 years. And, and also for projects that I've started at different phases in my career, my my co-authors, we're all in different stages and different places in our careers and in our life. And so it's actually comforting to know that things take time, that you can go back and revisit. And one of the pieces of advice that especially when you're working on papers, or if you're working on a team, like doing different proofs or program, or just whatever analysis it is that you're doing, whatever field you're in, sometimes you have to rely on someone else to double check your work, and so that can take time. So you kind of have to work on something else while you're waiting for that other thing to finish. So so there's some like multitasking involved, and I guess my advice would be to take to a level where when you have to go back, you kind of remember where you left off, so you don't have to go back all the way to the beginning. And I think that's, for us, who are working on multiple projects, I think that's helpful when you bring a project up to a point where you can work on something else and let that kind of sit on the side for a moment or marinate. And then when you're ready to go back to it, you don't have to go back to, all the way to the beginning to remember what you did. So that's my advice. And I would also say, talking to your peers too. I remember when I was a student, and as an undergrad and grad, when I was working on different research projects, I would talk to the other senior people, like the grad students or the postdocs, and even the visiting research professors. And we would go to the whiteboard and we would just kind of like, put our heads together and think about, okay, where are we missing? Did I just miss like a positive and negative sign, or what did I do? And so I think that helps too, is just, knowing that, you are in a program with other people. And, if you're comfortable reaching out to someone else, out of your institution, that's also an option too.
Thank you so much. I think all of this is great advice. I feel like I've done a little bit of each of them myself, not to the same degree that you all have, but all the advice I've heard from someone else before, which is great. So I think I'm going to be able to do math too. So thank you so much. Roy, you said you had another one.
Yeah, we have a couple more. So I'll ask the next one that came in order. So Nikita Campos asked, what strategies would you recommend for attempting to balance school, work, and your personal life?
So this time, if you don't mind, Dr. Harry, Dr. Anderson-Lee, and Dr. Murillo.
So I would say my main suggestion is to just keep the time entirely separate. So one thing that I found was just an entirely unhelpful pattern in graduate school was when I was having personal life time, I would feel like just entirely sinking guilt that I should be reading, or I should be writing, or I should be writing code or researching when I was supposed to be having fun. And then when I was trying to research, I would be feeling sad that I wasn't having fun. So I wasn't happy doing either. So if instead you just say to yourself, this is the time I set aside to have social time, and can just let that guilt go, then you can enjoy that time a lot more. And so when it's time to work, you can actually focus on work. And it's like, if you can just tell your brain that, it just makes you so much more productive. And I feel like when I came to that epiphany with the help of therapy, again, let me just put in a plug of that, it was it made a major difference for me. So just keep those times separate and fully devote yourself to each one when it's time for each.
Thank you. That's great. That's great advice. Dr. Anderson-Lee?
I'll just add to, in addition, because that's fantastic advice, and my therapist in grad school also told me, you need to separate the two. And so a step further from not just separating the time, but separating the space. So if you create a space for yourself where this is not where I do work, and I know that might be a little harder during COVID, but if you have a desk set up, let's say in your living room, then your bedroom we'll just say, right, or your bed space, you're not going to read articles before you go to bed. This is not the space where I do that. So that can also help.
I like that. Thank you so much. Dr. Murillo?
Yeah, so I agree with the advice. And I would also add that, I think work-life balance is a very personal question, and it means different things to different people. And I also want to say that, and I love this question, and I want to say that also it could depend on, different seasons in your life. So there are periods where, you have to sacrifice, in a semester to just finish your dissertation, or you're applying for jobs, which is also another job in addition to the job that you currently have, which is, hopefully finishing your PhD. And so and just recognize that could be just a season, just a few months or maybe a year where you're just trying to push through and finish, and surrounding yourself with supportive family and friends who understand that and understand that this is a season, that they're there to support you. And they're not, putting pressure on you to do other things, or they're positive influences in your life, not saying, why are you always studying or why are you always working, but they're supportive of sort of this season that you have to finish your work. So I think work-life balance is a very personal question. I think surrounding yourself with positive, encouraging people is helpful. And I would say one thing that has helped me as an undergrad, grad school, and even now, is recognizing that other people's, how they spend their time working, like on weekends or during the week, or what time they send emails, is not the same time that I have to reply emails to. And so everyone is different. Some people you're working with are directors or presidents, or are, everyone has, academia, government industry, whatever career we're in, everyone wears a different hat. And so just realize being yourself, I think, is important, being happy and just saying, this is what I need for my work-life balance. And that's important because you want to be productive, and you can't be productive if you're not happy and if you're not taking care of yourself, which is part of work-life balance. So that's my advice.
Thank you all so much. I think that's all great advice. Not that you need my approval, of course, but I mean, I think it resonates a lot with what my students come and talk to me about. And I think these are the answers I think they're sort of looking for. So thank you so much for saying that. Roy, you said you had one more.
Right? Another one from Rolando de Santiago. He asked, the amount of graduate programs out there can seem overwhelming. How did you make your choice? How did your program let you know that they were invested in your success?
Can you repeat that one more time for me?
Yes.
Sorry.
So the amount of graduate programs out there can seem overwhelming. How did you make your choice? How did your program let you know that they were invested in your success?
All right. It's a great question. Thank you. Shout out to Orlando, my mentee in Iowa. Now he's a professor at Purdue. All right. We'll start with Dr. Murillo, and then Dr. Anderson-Lee, and then Dr. Harry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So this is a great question. I won't go into too many detail, but when I was applying for grad school, I was accepted to more than one program. And when I was applying for postdocs, I was accepted to more than one program. So those were different like crossroads in my life where I had to decide where, to go. And for my grad program, I spent a lot of time talking to my mentor, Carlos Castillo Chavez. And I had funding. So that's one thing, is that if you're going into a PhD program, you should have funding. And so definitely look for that, talking to your future mentor or the future program that you're applying to, making sure that you have 5 or 6 years of guaranteed funding or what the plan is. I think that's really important. And aside from like the funding, which I assume that, that will be checkmarked. I think looking at the environment is also really important. And one thing I want to say about the environment is looking for like what programs they have to be successful. Like if they have a journal club, if they have like a peer matching program for new incoming graduate students, looking at the professor that you want to work with, looking at how many students they've advised. Are you their first PhD student? Are you like their 50th PhD student? And also seeing like where they go or maybe how long they take to graduate. So I think that's like really important. When you're deciding what program to go to. And I agree that it is overwhelming. There are a lot of programs. And I think talking to the students and understanding the culture of the environment, just making sure that you're a good fit, I think that's also really important. So that's what helped me, talking to my mentors when I was deciding which grad program and which postdoc to go to. For my postdoc, interestingly, I didn't have any personal connections. I didn't have like my mentor Carlos. He didn't know someone specifically at University of Alabama Birmingham to recommend me to. So I kind of went into a new environment, working with new people for the first time. But I had talked to other people there, and I knew that they had a really good postdoc program. The mentor that I was working with, Dr. Allison, he also has a great mentoring record as well. And so those were things that that helped in my decision to go.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. That's great. I forgot who I said next. Sorry, Dr. Anderson-Lee. Yes.
Yeah, that was really good advice. I was going to say all of those things. Reach out, talk to the current grad students, see where they're going after, see what they're doing after. I think is really important. And talking to your current professors to see if they have any connections. Your undergrad professors, if they have any connections, or if they know know anything about a certain program or know about a former student, who went to a certain program and how they felt. Conferences is also a great way. So Field of Dreams is how I've learned about Iowa State, obviously. And then I found out that somebody else that went to my undergraduate school was currently in the math program. And so it was sort of like I had this immediate connection with somebody there. So I think Dr. Murillo hit it on the head.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anderson-Lee. And Dr. Harry?
Yeah, I believe that when I was looking at programs, one thing that I was looking for was, I was looking specifically for programs where statistics was its own department, a separate department, which limited things down somewhat. And then I, in particular, was looking for schools that participated in programs like the Alliance, because to me, that was a signal that they cared about people that look like me, just simple as that. And one way so I ended up choosing to go to Purdue, and one way that I knew that Purdue was like invested in my success is because when I came to Purdue for to visit the department head made time to sit with me for 30 minutes and spent 30 minutes telling me how much she was invested in my success. Like literally sat there and was like, this is how I plan to get you through the next however many years you would be here. Like she'd like kind of like talk through it, like this will be hard, but this is what you would need to do, so that was great. I also did the whole thing. Like I remember I think I applied to something like 5 or 6 programs. And I remember looking through the list of graduate students in each program, looking for any like brown or black faces and emailing all of them and asking them how the program was, and getting some responses back. So that was pretty helpful. And then also, the funding was really important. So when I got 5 years of funding from a few programs, like that immediately put a few of them to the top of the list. So I had like some really good options to choose from. So.
Right. Thank you so much. We're running close to the end of this panel, but I think the answers have been awesome. They've been great. I think a lot of good advice for all of our students. I think kind of jumping in on that last one, one of the challenges we sort of gave the audience was maybe this weekend they could meet someone. These are the types of questions that they can ask this weekend is, how is this grad school program? How do you like it? How is it finding an advisor? So all the things that we were talking about in this last question, I think would be great ways to maybe start the conversation with other grad students and also with today with other professors that are at the conference. We are about the end. If there are any other questions, of course, I'm sure you can contact me, and hopefully the panelists are okay too, but for sure you can always contact any of us. We're all here to help. We all come back because I think all of us benefited a lot from the Math Alliance. It helped us kind of get to our goals and where we want to be. So we want to thank the Math Alliance. We want to thank our panelists. If we were all together, we'd all clap. I wish we had Zoom so you can at least put the clap, but thank you, Dr. Anderson-Lee, Dr. Murillo, and then Dr. Harry. And we have one more person to thank, of course, Dr. Roy Ariza. So maybe we can bring him on screen so we can see the voice behind the questions. Thank you, Roy. Thank you so much for moderating the questions for us.
Yes, of course, it was fun. It was good stuff.
And of course, thanks to our production team in the background. And I think this is what we got. So I don't know if we go back to Oscar or if this is it, but thank you all for participating. We loved it. So thanks.
Thanks, Roberto and Roy. And thanks to Drs. Anderson-Lee, Harry, and Murillo for a good time.